Imagine a lock so strong that no thief could ever pick it. A vault so secure that governments, corporations, and billionaires alike poured their fortunes into it, believing it could never fail. Now imagine discovering that nature itself has been conspiring silently to undo that lock, not with brute force, not with dynamite, but with the very laws of physics. That is the nightmare now haunting Bitcoin. For more than a decade, Bitcoin has stood as the world's great experiment in digital trust, a currency not printed by governments, not guaranteed by banks, but secured by mathematics alone. To believers, it was the future of money. Incorruptible, unbreakable, immortal. A $2 trillion fortress built not of stone or steel, but of cryptography. And yet, deep inside laboratories where subatomic particles are manipulated and frozen near absolute zero, machines are stirring that could make the fortress walls vanish like smoke. Machines not of silicon but of qubits, the strange building blocks of quantum computation. Two of this century's most radical technologies are on a collision course. Bitcoin, the emblem of financial rebellion, and quantum computing, the raw manifestation of physics at its strangest. If they meet, the result could be catastrophic, the unraveling of the cryptographic fabric that makes Bitcoin possible. To understand the scale of this, consider what's at stake. Roughly a quarter of all Bitcoin, hundreds of billions of dollars, sits in older wallets secured by algorithms that quantum computers may be able to crack within a decade. Among them, the mythical stash of Satoshi Nakamoto himself, believed to hold as many as 1.1 million untouched coins, worth well over $100 billion. Coins that, if ever stolen or moved, could trigger panic across global markets. The threat is not theoretical. Institutions as cautious as BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, have warned in official filings that quantum computing could compromise the security of the Bitcoin network. Gartner analysts place the odds of quantum attacks disrupting cryptocurrencies at 50% by 2037. Deloitte has raised the specter of hackers rewriting Bitcoin's transaction history, undoing trades, reshaping markets with the push of a button. It sounds like science fiction, but science fiction is often just science that hasn't arrived yet. At the heart of the threat lies a simple truth. Bitcoin is built on locks, and locks are only as strong as the time it takes to pick them. Classical computers, the machines that define our world, would need millions of years to break Bitcoin's cryptography. But quantum computers are not classical. They do not play by the same rules. With qubits, superposition, and entanglement, they can test possibilities simultaneously, collapsing centuries of brute force into moments. Thomas Amer, a researcher in quantum computing, calls it a superpower, a way of peeling away layers of encryption at speeds we can barely imagine. For hackers, it would be the Holy Grail. For Bitcoin, it would be the apocalypse. But the most haunting part is this. The countdown may have already begun. Quantum labs are advancing relentlessly, backed by billions in investment from governments and corporations. Google has claimed quantum supremacy. IBM is building machines with hundreds of qubits. D-Wave is experimenting with quantum blockchains. Each year the numbers grow, the milestones fall, and the gap between theory and reality shrinks. The question is not whether quantum computers will arrive, it is whether Bitcoin can adapt before they do. This is more than a story of finance. It is a story of trust itself. Money, after all, is nothing more than shared belief, a collective agreement that a number on a screen or a note in a wallet has value. Bitcoin was meant to replace fragile trust in governments with unbreakable trust in math. But what happens when the math itself is broken? The world has never faced a threat like this. Wars have been fought over gold, oil, land, religion. But never has the very concept of money faced annihilation by physics. And so we stand at the threshold of a strange new era. On one side, a digital empire of wealth secured by cryptography. On the other, machines capable of dissolving that empire with calculations that no human mind could even follow. What happens when they collide? Will Bitcoin evolve, adopting new quantum-resistant defenses, or will the first wave of quantum hackers crack open the vault and drain trust from the system forever? The story begins, as always, with promises. With the origin of Bitcoin itself, a white paper published in 2008 by a shadowy figure calling themselves Satoshi Nakamoto. A promise of money beyond borders, beyond politics, beyond corruption. A promise that math and math alone could secure value for eternity. A promise that physics may now be preparing to break. Every revolution begins with an idea. In October 2008, while the world reeled from financial collapse, an anonymous figure, or perhaps a group, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto, published a short, dense white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It was not written like a manifesto. There were no rallying cries, no slogans, no sweeping declarations about freedom or rebellion. It was technical, concise, precise. Yet within those 9 pages lay a vision capable of upending centuries of financial tradition. At its heart, Bitcoin promised liberation. No central banks, no trusted intermediaries, no reliance on governments to print, inflate, or devalue. Instead, a network of computers would maintain a shared ledger, a blockchain, where every transaction was recorded transparently, immutably, and beyond manipulation. This was not just another currency, it was a new kind of trust. Trust has always been the foundation of money. A coin is only worth something if people believe it is. A piece of paper is valuable because a government promises it is. Banks exist to mediate that trust, to guarantee deposits, to settle transactions, to secure wealth. But in 2008, the guardians of trust were exposed as fragile, corruptible, and reckless. The global financial crisis had shattered confidence in traditional institutions. Into this chaos stepped Nakamoto's idea: money secured not by faith in governments or banks, but by mathematics. Bitcoin's brilliance lay in solving what cryptographers called the double spending problem. In a digital world, anything can be copied: music, photos, movies. If money were digital, what would stop someone from spending the same coin twice? Previous attempts at digital currency had failed because they required a central authority to prevent this fraud. Nakamoto's solution was radical: make the entire network the authority. Each block of transactions would be cryptographically linked to the one before it, forming a chain. Once verified by a consensus of participants, the block could not be altered without rewriting the entire chain, an impossibility with current computing power. It was elegant, it was audacious, it was incorruptible. Bitcoin was born not just as technology but as mythology. Its origins were cloaked in mystery. To this day, nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto was: a lone genius, a team of developers, a pseudonym hiding a government project. The creator mined the earliest coins, possibly over 1 million of them, and then vanished, leaving behind a fortune now estimated at over $100 billion. Those coins have never moved. Like a buried treasure, they sit untouched, a ghostly reminder of Bitcoin's enigmatic birth. This mystery only added to Bitcoin's allure. It was a system without leaders, without rulers, without faces. It belonged to no one, and therefore to everyone. In the early years, Bitcoin was dismissed as a curiosity, a toy for cryptographers and libertarians. The first real-world transaction, 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas, is now legendary. But as the years passed, Bitcoin grew. It survived crashes, bans, scandals, and hacks. Each time it was declared dead, it came back stronger. Why? Because its promise remained unbroken. The blockchain endured. The cryptography held. Every attack failed against the mathematical fortress Nakamoto had built. To believers, this resilience proved Bitcoin's invincibility. The system was incorruptible, they argued, because it was not built on human trust. It was built on algorithms, on the immutable hardness of prime numbers and hash functions. The code was open, the ledger transparent, the rules unchangeable. No one owns Bitcoin, no one can stop it, no one can cheat it. That was the mantra, that was the promise. The mythology deepened as Bitcoin became not just currency, but symbol. It was the emblem of decentralization, a rebellion against central banks, a hedge against inflation, a digital gold. It was incorruptible money for a corrupt world. And yet, hidden within this promise lay an assumption so deep it was rarely questioned, that the cryptography protecting Bitcoin was unbreakable, that the locks it used were eternal. In truth, they were not eternal. They were only unbreakable with the tools of the time. Classical computers, no matter how powerful, could not hope to crack them within the lifetime of the universe. This was the foundation of trust, not faith in governments, but faith in time. And for years that faith seemed justified. Bitcoin's walls stood tall, its locks held firm, fortunes were stored, empires built, ideologies defended, all resting on the belief that the cryptographic fortress was forever. But time is a trickster. What feels eternal in one era can crumble in the next. Just as the castles of kings fell to cannons and the codes of war fell to machines like Enigma's destroyer at Bletchley Park, so too might Bitcoin's fortress fall. Not to politics, not to corruption, but to a deeper truth, the laws of physics. For while Bitcoin spread across the world, another revolution was quietly unfolding in laboratories. A revolution born not of rebellion, but of curiosity. Scientists probing the strange rules of the quantum world, rules that defy common sense, rules that Richard Feynman himself admitted nobody understands, rules that, if harnessed, could turn mathematics against itself. In these rules, the promise of Bitcoin meets its shadow, because the cryptographic walls that secure the blockchain are not absolute. They are only as strong as the time it takes to pick the lock. And in the quantum world, time collapses. The promise of Bitcoin was incorruptibility. The threat of quantum computing is the end of that promise. And so the story shifts, from the myth of unbreakable money to the reality of machines designed to break it. The question is no longer whether Bitcoin was brilliant. It was. The question is whether brilliance can survive physics itself. To understand the scale of the threat, we must first understand the machine. Bitcoin is not just a currency, it is an architecture, a cathedral built out of code and cryptography. And like any cathedral, its majesty comes from how its stones are placed, how its arches lock together, how its walls resist collapse. At its heart, Bitcoin is a ledger. That may sound unimpressive, almost banal. But ledgers are civilization's oldest technology of trust. From clay tablets in Mesopotamia to double-entry bookkeeping in Renaissance Italy, ledgers are what allows strangers to trade, cities to flourish, empires to rise. A ledger is more than numbers. It is a promise. Bitcoin's promise is that this ledger cannot be falsified. It cannot be erased, altered, or corrupted. It is carved not in stone, but in mathematics. Here is how it works. Every transaction in Bitcoin, every coin spent, every coin received, is grouped with others into a block. Each block contains a set of transactions, a timestamp, and a cryptographic fingerprint of the block before it. Once a block is filled, it is sealed and added to the chain. The fingerprint, a hash, ensures that no block can be changed without altering the entire chain behind it. Picture a long row of vaults. Each vault is locked, but its lock is made by the vault before it. To open one, you would have to open all the previous vaults in perfect sequence. The deeper the vault, the harder the task. Eventually, the chain becomes effectively unbreakable. But there is more. To add a block, it must be validated by the network. This is the process known as mining. Miners compete to solve a cryptographic puzzle, a proof of work that requires enormous computational effort. The first to solve it earns the right to add the block and is rewarded with new coins. The puzzle itself is not meaningful, but it makes fraud prohibitively expensive. Together, the blocks and the mining create a system that is decentralized, transparent, and secure. No central authority controls it. No single failure can destroy it. It is distributed across thousands of machines worldwide, each keeping its own copy of the ledger, each verifying the others. The genius lies in the simplicity. Each transaction is protected by keys, a public key and a private key. The public key is like your mailbox. Anyone can see it, anyone can send to it. The private key is like the key to open the mailbox. Only you can retrieve what is inside. The security of Bitcoin rests on the mathematical link between these keys. It is easy to generate a pair, but impossible for classical computers to calculate the private key from the public one. The impossibility comes from prime factorization. Imagine a giant lock built from two massive prime numbers multiplied together. Anyone can see the product, but without knowing the primes, it is nearly impossible to reverse engineer them. The numbers are so large that even the fastest classical computers would take longer than the lifetime of the universe to solve them. This is why Bitcoin was believed to be incorruptible. The ledger is chained, the puzzles are vast, the keys are unbreakable. To tamper with a single transaction, you would have to rewrite the entire chain while outpacing the collective power of the network. To steal from a wallet, you would need to crack a key that could not be cracked, not in any human lifetime. It is a fortress of mathematics. The architecture inspired awe. Analysts compared it to digital gold, rare, immutable, resistant to counterfeit. Enthusiasts declared it the future of finance. Governments tried and often failed to control it. Bitcoin was not just a currency, it was a symbol, incorruptible, beyond reach, and for years, the fortress held. Blocks stacked one after another, the chain grew longer, wallets multiplied, fortunes swelled. Hacks came, but they struck exchanges or careless users, never the blockchain itself. Each time defenders proclaimed the same mantra, Bitcoin has never been hacked. But behind the mantra lay an assumption that the mathematics Bitcoin relies upon is eternal, that the lock of prime factorization, the unbreakability of keys, the impossibility of rewriting blocks, these were laws of nature, immutable like gravity, except they are not laws of nature. They are assumptions based on the limitations of classical computation, assumptions that may crumble under the strange rules of the quantum world. Because while classical computers test one possibility at a time, quantum computers test many simultaneously. While classical algorithms crawl through factorization, quantum algorithms like shores leap across it. What classical machines cannot do in the lifetime of the universe, quantum machines may one day do in minutes. The blockchain is a chain of locks, but if quantum computers can forge a master key, the entire chain could fall. The irony is haunting. Bitcoin was built to replace fragile human trust with unbreakable mathematics, but the mathematics itself may prove fragile in the face of physics. To grasp the danger, imagine returning to our cathedral. For years it has stood, admired as unshakable, its stones perfectly aligned, its walls beyond reproach. Pilgrims come from around the world, entrusting their treasures to its vaults. But then whispers begin. The mortar that binds its stones is dissolving, not from storms or vandals, but from the shifting of the earth beneath it. That is the quantum threat. Not an attack from outside, but a collapse from within. And yet, even as the foundations tremble, Bitcoin's defenders remain steadfast. They argue that the network can adapt, that new forms of cryptography can be adopted, that the chain will survive. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps the cathedral can be rebuilt stronger. But the promise of incorruptibility is already cracked. The unbreakable lock may break. The eternal may end. And if Bitcoin, the fortress of trustless money, can be undone by physics itself, what does that say about value, about trust, about the very foundations of the digital world? For the answer, we must turn to the strangeness of the universe itself, to the bizarre, counterintuitive rules of quantum mechanics, rules that defy reason, rules that bend reality, rules that could dissolve the locks of cryptography as easily as morning sun dissolves mist. To see why Bitcoin's fortress may crumble, we must step into a world that is stranger than imagination. A world where the ordinary laws of logic bend, where certainty dissolves into probability, where particles exist in multiple states at once. This is the domain of quantum mechanics, the deepest description of reality humanity has ever discovered, and the most baffling. Richard Feynman, one of the giants of 20th century physics, once joked, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics." He wasn't exaggerating. The mathematics of quantum theory is clear. It predicts experiments with extraordinary precision. Yet its meaning, what it tells us about the nature of reality, remains shrouded in paradox. And within those paradoxes lies the fate of Bitcoin. At the heart of quantum mechanics is the idea of superposition. Imagine a coin flipped into the air. In classical physics, the coin is either heads or tails, even if you don't know which until it lands. In quantum mechanics, the coin is both heads and tails until observed. A particle can exist in multiple states at once, overlapping possibilities that collapse into certainty only when measured. This is not metaphor, it is experiment. Electrons pass through two slits at the same time. Photons interfere with themselves. Atoms hover between states of spin. The quantum world is not a world of absolutes, but of maybes. The second great principle is entanglement. When two particles interact in certain ways, their states become linked. Separate them by a meter or by 1,000,000 kilometers, and the link persists. Measure one, and the other responds instantly, as if distance did not exist. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Today, it is simply fact. Superposition and entanglement defy intuition, but they also unlock power. Power that makes quantum computing possible. Classical computers are built on bits, ones and zeros, heads or tails. Each calculation is a sequence of certainty. But quantum computers are built on qubits, quantum bits that can be both 1 and 0 simultaneously, thanks to superposition. A single qubit is ambiguous, fragile, strange. But combine them, and something extraordinary happens. The computer can explore countless possibilities in parallel. Entanglement amplifies this power. Qubits linked together form webs of correlation. A change in one ripples instantly to the others. It is as if, instead of soldiers marching in single file, an army moves in perfect synchronized formation across every possible battlefield at once. This is what makes quantum computing not just faster, but different in kind. Problems that would take classical computers millions of years can, in principle, be solved by quantum computers in hours, minutes, perhaps seconds. Among those problems is the one that underpins Bitcoin, factoring large prime numbers. The security of Bitcoin's keys rests on the difficulty of taking a massive number, hundreds of digits long, and breaking it down into the two primes that created it. For classical machines, this is effectively impossible. They must try factors one by one, a brute force that grows astronomically with size. But in 1994, mathematician Peter Shor discovered something astonishing, a quantum algorithm that could factor large numbers exponentially faster. Instead of crawling through possibilities, Shor's algorithm exploits superposition and entanglement to leap across them. What would take classical computers longer than the age of the universe could, for a quantum computer of sufficient size, take hours. Suddenly, the fortress of cryptography had a potential master key. For decades, this remained theoretical. Quantum computers were too fragile, too small, their qubits too unstable to challenge serious encryption. But each year the field advances. From a handful of qubits in the early 2000s, machines now boast hundreds. Error correction improves. Fidelity rises. Governments and corporations pour billions into the race. Google, IBM, D-Wave, Quantinuum, all chase the dream of cryptographically relevant quantum power. And looming over them all is a simple truth. Once such a machine exists, the locks that guard Bitcoin, along with much of modern finance, communications, and security, will be undone. This is why quantum mechanics is not just a curiosity for physicists, but a storm cloud over the future of money. The same principles that allow particles to blur between states, the same strangeness that Einstein found spooky, may one day strip away the trust that billions of dollars depend upon. Bitcoin's defenders argue the network can adapt. Post-quantum cryptography, new algorithms, new locks, these may buy time. But the original promise of incorruptibility has already cracked. The idea that Bitcoin is beyond attack, beyond corruption, beyond fragility is no longer secure. Physics itself has entered the game, and physics does not negotiate. The irony is sharp. Bitcoin was born as a rebellion against human institutions, a system that required no trust in governments or banks. But its survival now depends on whether it can outrun the very laws of nature. Quantum mechanics is not malicious. It is not a hacker in the dark. It is simply reality, unfolding as it always has. But in that unfolding lies a paradox. The more deeply we understand reality, the more fragile our illusions of permanence become. We built money on math. We built math on the assumption of time. But quantum mechanics shows us a universe where time, certainty, and separateness themselves are unstable. A universe where the locks we thought eternal dissolve into probability. This is the different universe Bitcoin must now confront. It is not a war of governments or corporations or ideologies. It is a collision between technology and physics, between the fortress of blockchain and the strangeness of the quantum world. And in that collision, one truth emerges. Incorruptibility is an illusion. Even the hardest fortress can fall when the earth beneath it shifts. Bitcoin believed it had transcended trust. Quantum mechanics may prove that nothing transcends reality. Step inside a laboratory where the future is being built, and you may be surprised. You will not find glowing neon consoles or humming supercomputers filling entire rooms as Hollywood imagines them. Instead, you will see something that looks almost absurdly mundane, a massive, gleaming cylinder, suspended like a chandelier from the ceiling, cables and pipes trailing down in delicate spirals. It looks less like a computer and more like an art installation. Yet, inside this strange, refrigerator-like shell lies a machine that could one day bring Bitcoin and the cryptographic foundations of our world to its knees. This is a quantum computer. At its heart, the device is not powered by silicon chips but by qubits, quantum bits. Where classical bits are either 0 or 1, qubits exploit the quantum principles of superposition and entanglement. They can be 0 and 1 at once, hovering between states until observed. When linked through entanglement, qubits form webs of correlation that classical bits can never achieve. The power is not in one qubit or even in 10. It is in scale. Every qubit doubles the potential computational space. 10 qubits can represent 1,024 states simultaneously. 50 qubits can represent over a quadrillion. A machine with hundreds or thousands could perform calculations that classical computers could never hope to finish. But harnessing qubits is not easy. They are fragile, delicate, ephemeral. The smallest disturbance, a fluctuation in temperature, a vibration, even stray electromagnetic noise, can cause them to collapse, their quantum state lost in an instant. To survive, qubits must be shielded from the world. This is why quantum computers live inside elaborate refrigerators that cool them to near absolute zero, colder than outer space. At these temperatures, particles slow, vibrations diminish, and the fragile quantum states can persist just long enough to perform calculations. Look closer and you will see qubits take many forms. Some are ions, trapped in magnetic fields and manipulated with lasers. Others are photons, dancing along optical fibers. Some are superconducting circuits, tiny loops of current that act like artificial atoms. Each approach has its champions, each its challenges, each a different path toward quantum supremacy. Superconducting qubits, pioneered by companies like IBM and Google, are currently the most advanced. Arrays of them sit on thumbnail-sized chips, each carefully controlled, each entangled with its neighbors. These are the machines that first demonstrated quantum supremacy, solving problems no classical computer could match. Trapped ion qubits, favored by companies like IonQ and Quantinuum, use individual atoms held in electromagnetic traps. Lasers manipulate their states, entangle them, and read them out. They are slower but more stable, with longer coherence times. Photonic qubits, harnessed by startups and researchers worldwide, promise scalability by encoding information in particles of light. They are less prone to environmental noise, but harder to entangle in large numbers. No matter the approach, the challenge is the same: scale and stability. Qubits must be increased by orders of magnitude while keeping their errors under control. Error correction, using many physical qubits to create one logical qubit, is essential. Without it, computations collapse in a haze of noise. With it, true cryptographically relevant machines become possible. And that is the horizon Bitcoin fears. Today's quantum computers are still small, tens to hundreds of qubits, noisy, limited. They cannot yet threaten the cryptography of Bitcoin or the RSA algorithms that protect banks, governments, and militaries. But the trajectory is unmistakable. In the 1980s, quantum computing was theoretical. In the 1990s, it was experimental. By the 2010s, companies had built machines with dozens of qubits. Now, in the 2020s, we are approaching hundreds. Each year brings new milestones. Google claimed quantum supremacy in 2019, performing a calculation in minutes that would take classical supercomputers millennia. IBM has announced roadmaps toward machines with thousands of qubits. Chinese researchers have demonstrated photonic processors with astonishing performance. Billions of dollars flow from governments, corporations, and venture capitalists into the race. Why? Because the stakes are beyond imagination. A functioning, fault-tolerant quantum computer would not only crack Bitcoin's defenses, it would revolutionize chemistry, medicine, logistics, artificial intelligence. It would simulate molecules too complex for classical machines, design new drugs, optimize supply chains, accelerate science itself. But it is cryptography that looms largest, because cryptography is the skeleton of our digital world. Every bank transfer, every encrypted message, every secure login, every blockchain wallet rests on mathematical problems classical machines cannot solve. If a quantum computer can solve them, the skeleton breaks. This is why quantum computing is often described with reverence and with fear. It is not just faster computing. It is computing from another universe, a universe where locks are not eternal, where the impossible becomes trivial. And the most symbolic lock of all, Bitcoin, the fortress of incorruptible money, may be among the first to fall. Consider the imagery: a Bitcoin wallet, untouched for 15 years, guarded by prime numbers too vast for classical machines to penetrate, a treasure chest buried in code, its key hidden in mathematics itself. And then, one day, a quantum computer hums to life in a laboratory and the lock dissolves, coins vanish. The legend of invulnerability evaporates in an instant. This is why BlackRock warns investors. This is why Deloitte writes of hackers rewriting transaction histories. This is why researchers speak of countdowns and timelines. Because the machines already exist. Small, fragile, imperfect, but real. And they are growing. Step back, and the irony sharpens. Bitcoin was meant to free money from human fallibility, from politics, from corruption. It placed trust in numbers alone. But numbers are not eternal. They are only as strong as the physics that protects them. And physics, through the strangeness of qubits, has offered us a new kind of machine. The question is not whether these machines will arrive. They have already arrived. The question is how far, how fast, how soon they will reach the size needed to threaten the cryptographic walls of Bitcoin. And when they do, what will remain of the promise of incorruptible money? Every fortress has a weakness. For castles, it was the gate. For ships, it was the hull. For armies, it was the supply line. For Bitcoin, the weakness lies in mathematics. To see it clearly, Imagine Bitcoin's cryptography as a vast lock. The public key is the lock itself, visible to all, embedded in every transaction. The private key is the secret combination that opens it. The genius of the system is that the lock can be made public without ever revealing the combination. Anyone can see the lock. No one can open it without the private key. This works because of prime numbers. Large primes are the bedrock of modern cryptography. When multiplied together, they create enormous composite numbers that are easy to produce, but nearly impossible to reverse engineer. Given the product of two massive primes, a classical computer would take millions of years to factor them back into their components. That impossibility is the wall protecting billions of dollars. For decades, this wall seemed impenetrable. The sheer scale of the numbers made brute force useless. Classical computers could try, but they would run out of time before they ever succeeded. Time was the protector. But in 1994, Peter Shor cracked the illusion. He developed an algorithm that could run on a quantum computer, using superposition and entanglement to factor large numbers exponentially faster than classical machines. Where a traditional computer must march step by step, Shor's algorithm leaps across the landscape, testing possibilities in parallel, amplifying the right answers, collapsing toward the solution. The result? What would take millions of years for classical machines could, in principle, take hours or minutes for a sufficiently powerful quantum computer. This is the existential threat. Bitcoin's fortress is not guarded by soldiers, walls, or even software updates. It is guarded by math. And if Shor's algorithm can be run on a machine with enough stable qubits that math collapses, the locks open, the vaults empty. Consider how fragile this makes the system. Roughly a quarter of all Bitcoin, including Satoshi Nakamoto's legendary hoard, sits in older wallets protected by public keys already exposed. Those keys cannot be changed retroactively. Once a quantum computer of sufficient power comes online, those coins are ripe for the taking. Hundreds of billions of dollars could vanish overnight, stolen not by clever hacks or human error, but by the raw inevitability of physics. Even newer wallets, better protected, are not immune. Quantum computers could eventually undermine the entire transaction process itself. Deloitte has warned that hackers might use quantum power to rewrite the history of trades, undoing blocks, altering chains, reshaping reality in the ledger. The blockchain, once considered immutable, could become malleable in the hands of quantum attackers. The threat is not distant speculation. Experiments have already hinted at what's possible. In 2024, Chinese researchers used a D-Wave system to break small-scale RSA encryptions, not yet Bitcoin's level of difficulty, but proof of concept. The demonstration was modest, but its implications thundered. If small encryptions can fall today, larger ones may fall tomorrow. The trajectory is clear, and the incentives are overwhelming. For hackers, a working quantum computer would be the ultimate weapon, not a tool to exploit one exchange or one company, but a skeleton key to unlock the very foundation of digital wealth. The first quantum heist would be unlike any in history, silent, unstoppable, irreversible. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, has already acknowledged this in filings to the US Securities and Exchange Commission. Their warning is blunt. Quantum computing could render Bitcoin's cryptography ineffective, compromising the security of the entire network. If the most cautious institutions in finance are raising alarms, the danger is not imaginary. Some argue that the timeline is long, that quantum machines large enough to run Shor's algorithm on Bitcoin-scale keys are still decades away. But others warn the countdown is shorter. Gartner analysts estimate a 50% chance of disruption by 2037. IBM suggests cryptographically relevant machines could appear within a decade. In the world of exponential growth, a decade is a heartbeat. The crypto community is not blind to this. Developers are exploring quantum-resistant algorithms, post-quantum cryptography, new forms of proof. But these defenses face immense challenges. Updating a decentralized network of millions is no small task, And the older coins, the sleeping giants in ancient wallets, remain permanently vulnerable. No patch can save them. This is why the quantum threat is existential. Bitcoin's security is not just a feature, it is its identity, its myth, its promise. Remove the incorruptibility, and the system collapses in trust. A single successful quantum attack, even on a dormant wallet, could ripple through markets like a detonation. The value would not just vanish from those coins, it would vanish from the belief that Bitcoin is unbreakable. And without belief, money ceases to exist. The irony deepens. Bitcoin was born to escape the fragility of human trust, replacing it with the hardness of mathematics. Yet mathematics itself is fragile in the face of quantum physics. The fortress was built on stone, but the stone itself is dissolving. This is why the phrase, "the day physics breaks money," is not metaphor. It is literal. Quantum mechanics, wielded through Shor's algorithm, could undo the trustless system at the core of Bitcoin. Not through politics, not through corruption, but through the quiet inevitability of computation at a different scale. And once the lock opens, it does not close again. Every story of treasure has its legend. A hoard hidden, a chest sealed, a fortune locked away. In Bitcoin's mythology, no treasure is greater, no legend more haunting than the coins of Satoshi Nakamoto. When Bitcoin was born in 2009, its mysterious creator mined the first blocks. In those early days, mining was easy. A laptop could generate thousands of coins. Satoshi mined steadily, methodically, amassing what is now believed to be more than 1 million bitcoins. At today's prices, the fortune is valued at over $100 billion. And then Satoshi disappeared. No one knows who he was, or if he was even a single person. No one knows why he left or where he went. What is known is that his coins, the primal treasure of the blockchain, have never moved. For 15 years, they have remained untouched, silent, resting in digital vaults secured by early algorithms. Those vaults are ancient by Bitcoin standards. The public keys are exposed. The private keys, once thought invulnerable, now sit like locks, rusting in the open air. For classical computers, they remain unbreakable. For quantum computers, they are the perfect target. Picture it. A machine hums to life in a laboratory. Cold, shielded, delicate. Qubits entangle, superpositions dance. Shor's algorithm begins its silent work. Hours later, perhaps minutes, the impossible becomes trivial. The private key is revealed. The treasure chest opens. Suddenly, coins untouched for over a decade begin to move. Not by Satoshi's hand, not by choice, but by theft. The impact would be seismic, not only because of the value, though $100 billion evaporating into the shadows would be a catastrophe. The true impact would be symbolic. The immovable had moved, the incorruptible had been corrupted, the promise of invulnerability would be shattered, markets would panic, trust would collapse. Bitcoin's mythology would unravel in real time.
For years, analysts have whispered about this possibility. Some believe Satoshi's coins will never move, that they are lost or intentionally preserved as relics. Others speculate that their movement could only mean one thing: the creator has returned. But if they move suddenly, inexplicably, under conditions only a quantum computer could achieve, the message will be clear. The fortress has fallen.
And Satoshi's treasure is not alone. Thousands of early wallets, created when Bitcoin was young and its security assumptions less robust, lie dormant. Collectively, they hold millions of coins, hundreds of billions in value. Like ancient vaults, they sit exposed, waiting. For quantum attackers, these are the low-hanging fruit. They require no rewriting of the blockchain, no tampering with active transactions, no confrontation with modern defenses. They are simply keys waiting to be guessed, unguessable for classical machines, but not for quantum ones. This is why experts warn that the first wave of quantum attacks will not strike exchanges or miners. They will strike the past. They will strike the coins that history has left vulnerable. And in doing so, they will strike the heart of Bitcoin's legend. Consider the irony. Satoshi created Bitcoin to escape the corruption of banks, to build a system beyond manipulation. His own fortune, untouched, became a symbol of purity, proof that Bitcoin was more than greed, more than speculation, a monument to the idea itself. But monuments crumble. And in this case, the monument could be stolen, repurposed, drained. The untouched coins could fund criminals, corporations, even governments. They could become the spoils of the first great quantum heist. The danger is not only theft, it is doubt. If those coins move, how can anyone know whether it was Satoshi or an attacker? How can anyone prove whether the system is safe or broken? The ambiguity itself could destabilize markets, and markets are creatures of psychology. Bitcoin's value is not in the coins themselves, but in the belief that they cannot be counterfeited, corrupted, or stolen. If that belief shatters, value collapses with it. Imagine the headlines: Satoshi's fortune hacked. Bitcoin's founder robbed by physics. The end of digital gold. Investors would flee. Governments would tighten regulations. Competitors would exploit the chaos. Even those who remained would no longer see Bitcoin as incorruptible. They would see it as fragile, vulnerable, mortal. This is the nightmare haunting Bitcoin's defenders. Not a gradual erosion, not a technical debate, but a single, catastrophic event. The unlocking of Satoshi's vault. The crypto community knows this. Quietly, they prepare. They develop post-quantum cryptography, encourage users to move coins to safer addresses, devise strategies for defense. But the past cannot be patched. The old coins remain where they are, their locks unchanged, their vulnerability permanent. And so the treasure sits, gleaming in the dark, waiting for the first thief, with the power of physics in his hands. In this possibility lies the ultimate irony. Bitcoin was built on distrust of human institutions. Its promise was incorruptibility, independence, permanence. But its greatest treasure may one day be stolen not by banks, not by governments, not by corruption, but by the cold inevitability of quantum mechanics. If that day comes, the myth of Bitcoin will end where it began, with Satoshi. And the world will learn a harsh truth. Even the most incorruptible systems can be corrupted when the universe itself rewrites the rules. Every threat is judged not only by its magnitude, but by its timing. A danger that looms centuries away inspires curiosity, perhaps even complacency. A danger that looms within our lifetime inspires urgency, panic, preparation. When it comes to quantum computing and Bitcoin, the question is not whether the danger exists. It does. The question is, how fast will it arrive? Timelines in technology are treacherous things. Optimists often predict breakthroughs years before they occur. Skeptics dismiss possibilities until they are undeniable. Somewhere between hype and denial lies reality, and reality is accelerating. Today's quantum computers are still limited. They contain hundreds of qubits, noisy and fragile, capable of solving problems interesting to scientists but irrelevant to Bitcoin's fortress of encryption. A machine capable of running Shor's algorithm at scale, factoring the massive prime numbers that secure Bitcoin's keys, does not yet exist. But the pace of progress is undeniable. In 2019, Google claimed quantum supremacy, performing a calculation on its Sycamore processor in minutes that would have taken classical supercomputers thousands of years. The result was specific and not practically useful, but it demonstrated a threshold. Quantum machines could outperform classical ones in certain domains. IBM responded with skepticism, but then released its own roadmaps for machines with thousands of qubits by the mid-2020s. By 2025, Chinese researchers had demonstrated photonic processors with astonishing performance in specialized tasks. D-Wave, Quantinuum, and others had scaled their systems into the hundreds of qubits. Microsoft, Amazon, and governments from the United States to Europe to China poured billions into the race. The horizon no longer seemed abstract. It seemed inevitable. How inevitable? Analysts disagree. Gartner, a leading technology research firm, places the odds of quantum computers disrupting Bitcoin at 50% by 2037, little more than a decade away. IBM Quantum Safe suggests cryptographically relevant machines could appear in as little as 10 years. Optimists, particularly in the investment world, believe breakthroughs could come even sooner. Consider the trajectory. In the 1980s, quantum computing was purely theoretical. In the 1990s, it was experimental, with a handful of qubits in tightly controlled labs. By the 2000s, researchers had built rudimentary prototypes. By the 2000s, the first serious machines emerged. Now, in the 2020s, the scale is rising exponentially, from dozens of qubits to hundreds, and soon, perhaps very soon, thousands. Exponential progress is difficult for the human mind to grasp. We think linearly, step by step, year by year. But exponential growth is a curve that bends upward suddenly, violently. One moment the technology seems irrelevant, the next it is rewriting the rules of civilization. That curve is already bending. Skeptics argue the technical challenges remain immense. Qubits are fragile. Error correction is brutally demanding. To run Shor's algorithm against Bitcoin-scale encryption might require millions of stable qubits far beyond today's capabilities. The machines we have are noisy, imprecise, prone to collapse. Scaling them is not just a matter of adding more. It requires breakthroughs in stability, control, and architecture. But breakthroughs have a way of arriving sooner than expected. Classical computing offers a lesson. In the 1940s, computers filled entire rooms, clumsy and fragile, dismissed by many as impractical. By the 1970s, they sat on desktops. By the 2000s, they lived in pockets. Each decade collapsed the distance between impossible and inevitable. Quantum computing may follow a similar arc. What today seems decades away may, with the right discovery, arrive in half the time. And once a breakthrough occurs, the spread will be relentless. Governments will seize it. Corporations will commercialize it. Hackers will covet it. This is why the timelines matter less than the inevitability. Whether 5 years, 10 or 20, the collision is coming. The only uncertainty is whether Bitcoin and the broader cryptographic world will adapt in time. And here lies the danger. Adaptation is slow. Moving an entire decentralized network to post-quantum algorithms requires consensus, upgrades, coordination on a global scale. Millions of wallets, exchanges, and systems must align. This cannot happen overnight. Meanwhile, the old wallets, the Satoshis, the relics of Bitcoin's youth, remain permanently vulnerable. Even if the network adapts, the past cannot be secured. The nightmare scenario is simple. Quantum computers arrive sooner than expected, before defenses are deployed, before adaptations are complete. A single machine, operated in secret, targets the exposed wallets. In hours, billions vanish. Trust collapses. The question is no longer purely technical, it is strategic. Who gets there first? Governments? Corporations? Criminal syndicates? If a nation develops a cryptographically relevant quantum computer in secret, it may choose not to announce it. Instead, it may quietly siphon funds, manipulate markets, or hoard the ability as a weapon. The world may not even realize the fortress has been breached until too late. If a corporation develops one, it may declare victory, reassure investors, offer solutions, or it may hide the capability to profit from it silently. If hackers gain access, the result will be chaos, a heist unlike any in history, draining wealth invisibly, untraceably, instantly. This is why experts like IBM's Michael Osborne warn that action must be taken now. Assets can be stolen from existing wallets if fairly simple actions are not taken to protect them, he says. Move coins from old addresses. Hide public keys. Prepare for the storm before the first lightning strikes. But human nature resists preparation. We discount the future. We trust in the status quo. We believe the fortress will stand because it always has. And so the countdown ticks, not measured in years but in qubits, not in calendars but in milestones. Each advance in stability, each increase in fidelity, each new record in qubit count brings the horizon closer. Perhaps the reckoning will come in 2037, perhaps in 2032, perhaps sooner. The exact year is unknowable. What is certain is that time is not on Bitcoin's side. The fortress does not crumble all at once. It crumbles in silence beneath the surface until the day the walls give way. And when they do, the question will not be how soon, but what now? Every revolution breeds its counter-revolution. Every weapon summons a shield. And in the unfolding story of Bitcoin versus quantum computing, the battle lines are already being drawn. On one side are the physicists, engineers, and corporations racing to build the first cryptographically relevant quantum computer. Their goal is not to destroy Bitcoin, but the side effects of their ambition could collapse it. On the other side are developers, mathematicians, and cryptographers working feverishly to design defenses that can withstand the inevitable arrival of quantum power. It is, in every sense, an arms race. The offensive side is dazzling in its scale. Google, IBM, Microsoft, D-Wave, Quantinuum, Rigetti, IonQ, titans of technology and specialized startups alike pour billions into the pursuit of larger, more stable quantum machines. Governments, too, are deeply invested. The United States has committed billions through the National Quantum Initiative. China has declared quantum supremacy a strategic goal, funding massive research centers in Hefei and Beijing. The European Union, Canada, Japan, all are competing in what some call the new space race, but fought with qubits instead of rockets. The allure is irresistible. A functioning, large-scale quantum computer promises scientific revolutions, new medicines, optimized logistics, breakthroughs in AI, simulations of chemistry beyond imagination. But within those promises lies the dark shadow, the collapse of existing cryptography. For Bitcoin, this means that the very same labs advancing human knowledge are also building the tools that could break it. The defensive side is no less determined. Within the cryptocurrency community, whispers of the quantum threat have grown into urgent discussions. Developers are exploring post-quantum cryptography, algorithms designed to resist quantum attacks. These include lattice-based systems, hash-based signatures, and multivariate quadratic equations. Unlike today's vulnerable prime factorization, these new schemes are believed to be secure even against Shor's algorithm. NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, has already begun standardizing post-quantum algorithms for general cybersecurity. Bitcoin developers are watching closely, experimenting with ways to integrate them into wallets and transactions. The hope is that by the time quantum computers arrive, the network will have already upgraded. But there are obstacles, immense obstacles. First, Bitcoin is decentralized. No one commands it. Changes must be agreed upon by consensus across a vast global community of developers, miners, and users. Unlike a corporation or government that can simply issue an update, Bitcoin requires alignment, and alignment is slow. Second, the sheer scale of migration is daunting. Millions of wallets, exchanges, and payment systems would need to transition to new algorithms. Old coins, especially those in dormant wallets, may never move. They will remain vulnerable, exposed, tempting targets for quantum attackers. Third, time may not be on Bitcoin's side. Building quantum machines is accelerating. Coordinating a defensive migration may lag. The result is a race, not only between technologies, but between timelines. Will quantum attackers arrive before the defenses are in place? Or will Bitcoin evolve fast enough to preserve its promise? Some argue the defenses are already underway. Coins can be moved from older, vulnerable addresses to newer, quantum-resistant ones. Protocols are being designed to upgrade the system without breaking the chain. The Bitcoin community is not idle, but its actions are quiet, often invisible, cautious not to spark panic in markets that depend on confidence. Others argue this caution is dangerous. Transparency is needed, they say. Investors must know the risks, must demand solutions now, not later. For if the first quantum attack comes before defenses are deployed, the result will not be gradual, it will be catastrophic. And yet there is a haunting irony here. The very tool that threatens Bitcoin may also be its salvation. Quantum computers, wielded not by attackers but by defenders, could be used to design and test quantum-resistant algorithms. They could create new forms of proof of work, new types of hashing, new architectures of trust. Just as the nuclear age brought both weapons and power plants, so too might the quantum age bring both destruction and salvation. But salvation is not guaranteed. In any arms race, advantage often goes to the attacker. A single breakthrough on the offensive side, a machine hidden in a government lab, a secret cluster of qubits reaching stability, could strike before defenses are ready. Defenders must prepare for an attack they cannot see, a deadline they cannot know. The race is not only technical, it is psychological. Bitcoin's value depends on belief. If the community believes the network is adapting, confidence may hold. If rumors of a breakthrough spread, whispers that quantum computers can already crack wallets, belief may fracture, markets may collapse even before the first attack occurs. This is the paradox. Bitcoin was designed to exist beyond trust, beyond human frailty. But now its survival depends not only on code, but on human faith. Faith that the defenders are moving faster than the attackers. Faith that the arms race is not already lost. And so the world waits. On one side, gleaming refrigerators filled with qubits multiply across labs, governments invest billions, algorithms like shores hover over the future like specters. On the other, developers draft new blueprints for cryptography, post-quantum algorithms spread quietly, and coins shift silently from old addresses to new. Neither side can see the other clearly, neither side knows how long it has. But both know the stakes. The first side to win this race will not merely claim a prize, it will decide the fate of money itself. History teaches us that breakthroughs rarely arrive in the hands of saints. Fire was used for warmth and for war. The printing press spread knowledge and propaganda. Nuclear power promised electricity too cheap to meter and delivered weapons that could incinerate cities. Quantum computing will be no different. If a nation or a corporation achieves the breakthrough first, there may be regulation, restraint, secrecy. If hackers achieve it first, there will be none. Picture the moment. Somewhere in a basement or perhaps in a rented warehouse disguised as an AI startup, a machine hums to life. It is not sleek, not futuristic, but a tangle of refrigeration units, optical cavities, racks of lasers and superconducting chips. Unimpressive to the untrained eye, but history's most dangerous weapon to those who know. Shor's algorithm begins to run. The first targets are obvious, the old wallets. Addresses with exposed public keys untouched for years, holding fortunes beyond imagination. Satoshi's treasure, early adopters' stashes, forgotten wallets that once belonged to pioneers, now resting as digital relics. In minutes, billions could vanish. Hundreds of billions. The first quantum heist would not be subtle. It would be seismic. News would spread instantly. Satoshi's bitcoins are moving. Dormant wallets drained. Quantum computer confirmed. Markets would convulse. The belief that Bitcoin is incorruptible would collapse. Not because of a flaw in code, but because physics itself had picked the lock. But the attack would not end with the old wallets. The real prize lies in the blockchain itself. Deloitte warned of this years ago. Quantum computers might become so fast that they could undermine the transaction process itself. Hackers could rewrite history. Imagine it. A block is added to the chain, transactions recorded, balances updated. But a quantum attacker retroactively forges a new chain, longer and faster, erasing the previous one. Suddenly, trades vanish. Payments disappear. Coins you thought were yours return to their sender. Reality itself is rewritten. In classical computing, this attack is called a 51% attack. requiring control of the majority of the network's computational power. Impractical for any single actor. But with a quantum computer, the power of thousands of miners could be dwarfed by a single machine. The cost of rewriting history could fall from impossibility to triviality. What then is left of trust? The nightmare deepens. Wallets drained, blocks rewritten, exchanges paralyzed. The Bitcoin network, once heralded as the immutable ledger of truth, revealed as fragile. Investors would flee, governments would intervene, the myth of decentralization exposed as illusion. And unlike other hacks, there would be no recovery. When an exchange is hacked, funds can sometimes be traced, stolen coins blacklisted, perpetrators hunted. But quantum theft would leave no trace. The keys would open legitimately. The blockchain itself would validate the theft. From the network's perspective, nothing illegal had occurred. The lock had simply been opened with the right combination. Only the right combination was not supposed to be knowable. The impact would ripple beyond Bitcoin. Other cryptocurrencies, built on similar cryptographic foundations, would also collapse. Ethereum, Litecoin, countless tokens, all vulnerable. The entire crypto ecosystem, valued in trillions, could implode in days. And still it would not end. Banks use the same kinds of cryptography to secure transactions. Corporations use it to protect communications. Governments use it to safeguard state secrets, military orders, even nuclear codes. If hackers wield quantum computers before defenses are ready, the breach will not stop at Bitcoin. It will cascade across the digital world. This is why the prospect is so chilling. The first successful quantum heist would not be measured in billions stolen, but in trust lost. Trust in digital money. Trust in encryption. Trust in the very possibility of secure communication. How would the world respond? Governments might try to shut down Bitcoin entirely, claiming it unsafe, unfit for commerce. Exchanges might freeze withdrawals. Regulators might outlaw wallets not certified as post-quantum secure. Panic would spread not only through markets but through society. And yet the worst part is this. No one might ever know who carried out the attack. A state actor could disguise itself as criminals. Criminals could disguise themselves as a rogue state. Attribution in the digital world is already nearly impossible. With quantum power, it becomes hopeless. This is the nightmare that keeps cybersecurity experts awake. Not the existence of quantum computers, but the possibility that the first relevant machine may not announce itself in triumph, but in silence. That it may not be revealed in a paper or a press release, but in the sudden, inexplicable collapse of trust. For Bitcoin, that collapse would be existential. A system built on the promise of incorruptibility cannot survive the revelation of vulnerability. Once the myth is broken, it cannot be repaired. In the crypto world, there is a mantra, HODL, hold on for dear life. But in the quantum world, the hands holding may find the rope burned away. The question is stark. What if hackers get there first? What if the first proof of a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is not a scientific paper, but the disappearance of Satoshi's coins? What if the first signal is not discovery, but theft? The answer is simple. If that happens, it will not just be the end of Bitcoin, it will be the end of trust as we know it. Warnings about technology often begin on the fringes, whispered in academic papers, debated in obscure conferences, dismissed as paranoia by the mainstream. But when the world's largest asset manager begins writing those warnings into official filings with the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the whisper has become a siren. BlackRock is no ordinary company. With more than $10 trillion under management, it is the gravitational center of global finance. Its decisions ripple across markets, its warnings shape investor behavior, its words carry the weight of governments. And in 2023, 2024 and beyond, BlackRock began adding a new risk to its filings, quantum computing. The language is blunt. Quantum computing could result in the cryptography underlying the Bitcoin network becoming ineffective, which, if realized, could compromise the security of the Bitcoin network. This is not a headline from a blog, not a speculation in a tech magazine. This is a statement to regulators, legally binding, issued under penalty of law, warning shareholders that their money is at risk. The significance cannot be overstated. BlackRock manages ETFs, pension funds, sovereign wealth. It invests on behalf of governments, institutions, and millions of ordinary people whose retirements and futures are tied to its strategies. When it acknowledges a risk, it is not indulging in science fiction, it is preparing for reality, and BlackRock is not alone. Other firms have echoed the warning. Deloitte, one of the Big Four accounting giants, has cautioned that quantum computers might eventually undermine the Bitcoin transaction process itself, allowing hackers to rewrite history. Gartner has assigned odds, a 50% chance of disruption by 2037. IBM's experts speak of cryptographically relevant machines within a decade, but BlackRock's warning is the most chilling because it pierces the veil of denial. For years, Bitcoin's defenders insisted the quantum threat was distant, exaggerated, or irrelevant. Yet when the largest asset manager in the world tells regulators it could lose client funds because of quantum computing, denial is no longer possible. It is not merely a question of technology, it is a question of trust. If BlackRock warns its shareholders, it is also warning the market. And markets are creatures of psychology. Confidence is fragile, belief delicate. A few words in an SEC filing can spread fear like wildfire, changing behavior, accelerating panic. Picture the scene. A Bitcoin investor reads the filing. At first, perhaps curiosity. Quantum computers? Isn't that a problem for the far future? But then he remembers the pace of technological change. He remembers Google's claim of quantum supremacy. He recalls the headlines about China's advances. He imagines Satoshi's untouched hoard, vulnerable to a machine that could appear tomorrow or next year or 10 years sooner than anyone expects. Fear begins to seep in. Quietly, without announcement, coins are sold, positions are trimmed, exposure reduced. Others do the same. The price slips, analysts notice, headlines follow, and what began as a line in an SEC document becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Markets shaken by the very possibility of quantum disruption. The irony is sharp. Bitcoin was born in defiance of institutions like BlackRock. It was meant to be money without middlemen, value without banks, trust without corporations. And yet now, its fate may be swayed by those very institutions. When BlackRock speaks, investors listen, even those who despise its dominance. The warning also reveals another truth. The quantum threat is not confined to cryptocurrency. BlackRock's concern is broader. If Bitcoin can be cracked, so can other forms of digital trust. Bank transfers, secure communications, corporate secrets, national security. The entire architecture of modern finance rests on cryptography no stronger than Bitcoin's. In that sense, Bitcoin is not an isolated victim. It is simply the most visible, the most symbolic. It is the canary in the coal mine of digital trust. If quantum computing can break Bitcoin, it can break everything, and BlackRock knows this. Its warning is not only about Bitcoin ETFs. It is about the fragility of a financial system built on locks that may soon dissolve. The message is haunting. Prepare now. And yet, preparation is easier said than done. As we've seen, Bitcoin's decentralized nature makes change slow. Institutions may move faster, adopting post-quantum algorithms, investing in new cryptography, securing their systems. But Bitcoin cannot be patched with a memo. Its defenses must be rebuilt in the open, with consensus, with time. And time may be the one thing it does not have. So the warnings grow louder. Gartner's percentages, Deloitte's cautions, BlackRock's filings, even the SEC itself, by accepting those filings, acknowledges the risk. And through it all, the clock ticks. The presence of these warnings shifts the story. It is no longer about eccentric researchers or speculative headlines. It is about the mainstream, about the most powerful financial players on Earth quietly admitting what few want to say out loud. The age of quantum may not be far away, and when it arrives, it may tear apart the architecture of digital wealth. For Bitcoin, the effect is corrosive. The myth of incorruptibility depends not only on code, but on confidence. Once the most cautious voices in finance admit doubt, the myth is weakened. And myths, once cracked, rarely heal. The question remains, will the warnings be heeded, sparking a race to reinforce the fortress? Or will they be dismissed, ignored, laughed off until the first heist makes the laughter stop? BlackRock has played its role, it has spoken. The words are on record, in ink, in filings that cannot be denied. The world cannot say it was not warned. Bitcoin may be the most visible target of the quantum storm, but it is not the only one. In truth, Bitcoin is merely the tip of an iceberg, a gleaming symbolic shard of a far larger structure. Beneath the surface lies the entire digital civilization we have built, and its foundations are no stronger than Bitcoin's. Every email you send, every password you type, every banking transaction, stock trade, medical record, diplomatic cable, or classified government order, all of it depends on the same cryptographic principles that Bitcoin does. The fortress of digital trust is vast, and every stone in its wall is carved from prime numbers. Consider online banking. Each time you log into your account, your computer and the bank's servers exchange cryptographic keys. These keys are designed to keep prying eyes from seeing your balance or intercepting your transfers. Without encryption, your financial life would be an open book. Consider secure messaging. WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, their promises of privacy rest entirely on encryption. Without it, every intimate conversation, every private photograph, every whispered secret would be exposed. Consider military communications. Orders transmitted across oceans, instructions to submarines, targeting data for missiles, all secured by cryptographic systems. Break those systems, and entire defense structures collapse. Consider healthcare. Patient records, genomic data, life-saving research shared across networks. Without encryption, identity theft and medical chaos follow. Even the mundane is at risk. VPNs, cloud storage, software updates, e-commerce checkouts, Wi-Fi routers, all are secured by the same mathematics. If quantum computers can break Bitcoin, they can break them all. The scope of the threat is staggering. It is not simply money that hangs in the balance, but privacy, security, sovereignty. A successful quantum attack would not only drain wallets, it could expose governments, collapse industries, destabilize nations. Imagine a future in which quantum attackers intercept state secrets, rewrite financial ledgers, or crash markets by invalidating transactions. Imagine a world where your personal data, every message, every password, every click, is suddenly transparent. The world has already had glimpses of what happens when trust falters. In 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack spread through hospitals, paralyzing equipment, endangering lives. In 2021, the Colonial Pipeline hack disrupted fuel supplies across the eastern United States, causing panic at gas stations. These attacks used conventional exploits. Their damage was limited. But quantum attacks would not be limited. They would strike the skeleton itself. The phrase post-quantum cryptography is now common in cybersecurity circles. It refers to new algorithms designed to resist quantum attacks. Lattice-based cryptography, hash-based signatures, multivariate quadratic equations, strange, exotic names for what may become the locks of the future. Governments are already investing billions to test and standardize them. NIST has launched programs to select algorithms robust enough to survive the quantum era. But here, again, the challenge is time. Updating a single bank's system is possible. Updating the global internet is not so simple. Billions of devices, routers, phones, satellites, servers, all run on encryption vulnerable to quantum attacks. Coordinating their upgrade is like replacing the engines on an airplane mid-flight. And lurking in the shadows is a chilling possibility known as harvest now, decrypt later. Hackers today may already be capturing encrypted data, storing it, waiting. They cannot crack it now. But once quantum computers arrive, they can. Secrets thought safe today may be exposed tomorrow. Financial records, state documents, personal histories, all vulnerable retroactively. Bitcoin, in this sense, is not unique. It is simply loud. Its vulnerability is public, its value visible, its mythology dramatic. But its fragility is shared by everything digital. This is why the quantum threat is not merely technological, it is civilizational. It asks a question far deeper than the fate of one cryptocurrency. Can we preserve trust in a world where locks no longer hold? Trust is invisible, but it is the scaffolding of society. Without it, commerce halts, communication fails, relationships fracture. In the digital age, cryptography is the machinery of trust. Break the machinery, and the scaffolding trembles. For Bitcoin believers, this is existential. Their fortress of incorruptibility may crumble. But for humanity, the stakes are greater still. Our entire digital world may face the same fate. This is why the arms race matters. It is not simply a contest between hackers and Bitcoin developers. It is a race for the soul of the digital age. Whoever wins will shape the future not only of money, but of privacy, freedom, and sovereignty. And the race is closer than many wish to admit. Quantum labs inch forward, qubit by qubit. Cybersecurity experts scramble to prepare. Governments draft strategies, fund research, issue warnings. But preparation is slow, and the countdown does not pause. In the shadows, we must ask, what if defenses arrive too late? What if one morning we wake to headlines of not just stolen coins, but breached banks, exposed governments, decrypted secrets? Bitcoin may be the first victim, but it will not be the last. The quantum storm does not target one fortress. It targets the architecture of digital trust itself. And when trust falls, what remains? Every fortress under siege faces the same choice: adapt or fall. For Bitcoin, and for the broader digital civilization it represents, the siege has already begun. The attackers are not soldiers at the gates, but qubits humming in laboratories, algorithms sharpening their edge. The defenders are not knights or generals, but cryptographers, engineers, and developers racing against a countdown written in physics. The question is brutal in its simplicity. Can the fortress adapt before the walls give way? Adaptation in principle is possible. Cryptography is not a monolith, but a shifting frontier. For decades, mathematicians have designed new forms of locks, some resistant to quantum attack. Post-quantum cryptography, lattice-based, code-based, hash-based, multivariate schemes, offers hope. These systems are not dependent on prime factorization or discrete logarithms, the weaknesses Shor's algorithm exploits. Instead, they rely on problems believed to be resistant even to quantum shortcuts. Governments recognize this. The US National Institute of Standards and Technology has launched a program to standardize post-quantum algorithms. Prototypes exist, pilots run, draft standards are already circulating, other nations follow suit. The defenders are not asleep. But adaptation is not simply about designing stronger locks. It is about replacing the locks already in use. And here the scale of the challenge becomes daunting. Consider Bitcoin. To transition the network to quantum-resistant cryptography would require global consensus across developers, miners, exchanges, and users. This is not a simple software patch. It is a hard fork, a radical upgrade that risks dividing the community, fragmenting the network, and sparking disputes. Some will resist, fearing disruption, loss of compatibility, or ideological compromise. Others will insist it is the only path to survival. Even if consensus is reached, the migration itself is colossal. Millions of wallets must be updated, exchanges must adapt, miners must upgrade, and the blockchain itself must evolve without breaking its history. The logistical challenge is staggering, and still the old wallets remain. Coins untouched for over a decade, secured by exposed public keys, cannot be retroactively upgraded. They are monuments of vulnerability, treasures waiting for the first quantum thief. No adaptation can save them. For the broader digital world, the challenge is even greater. Banks, corporations, governments, militaries all use encryption vulnerable to quantum attack. Transitioning them to post-quantum cryptography means updating trillions of lines of code, billions of devices, thousands of protocols. It is an effort on the scale of replacing the nervous system of civilization while keeping it alive and functioning. And then there is time. No one knows when the first cryptographically relevant quantum computer will arrive. Optimists say decades, realists say within 10 years. Alarmists whisper it may already exist in secret. The uncertainty is paralyzing. If the timeline is long, there is time to adapt. If the timeline is short, the defenders are already too late. This uncertainty creates risk of complacency. Humans discount the future, assuming tomorrow will resemble today. Developers reassure themselves that adaptation can wait. Governments reassure their citizens that progress is slow. Investors reassure themselves that Bitcoin has survived every storm so far. But exponential progress is a trickster. It lulls with gradual steps, then accelerates suddenly, collapsing decades into years, years into months. When the breakthrough arrives, it may arrive all at once, without warning. And by then, the time to adapt may be gone. Some argue Bitcoin will not collapse, even if the first quantum heist occurs. They argue the community will rally, the code will adapt, new algorithms will be deployed. The fortress may be damaged, but it will be rebuilt. Perhaps. But the damage would not only be technical, it would be psychological. The promise of incorruptibility, once broken, cannot be remade. A single catastrophic breach, the theft of Satoshi's hoard, the rewriting of blocks, could destroy the myth upon which Bitcoin's value rests. For other systems, the stakes are even greater. Banking systems cannot collapse and rebuild overnight. Governments cannot tolerate the exposure of classified secrets. Militaries cannot afford vulnerability in command systems. For them, adaptation is not optional, it is existential, and so the arms race intensifies. Attackers push forward with qubits and algorithms. Defenders scramble to deploy post-quantum cryptography before the breach arrives. The outcome is uncertain. History offers grim lessons. Rarely do defenders adapt in time. The castles of Europe fell to cannons before they could be redesigned. The Maginot Line was bypassed by tanks before it could be reinforced. Codes in World War II were broken before replacements could be deployed. But history also offers hope. The internet itself has evolved countless times, from dial-up to broadband, from IPv4 to IPv6, from weak passwords to multi-factor authentication. Systems can adapt if urgency drives them. The question is whether urgency will arrive before catastrophe, because adaptation is not only a matter of code, it is a matter of belief. If Bitcoin survives the quantum era, it will not be because its locks were unbreakable. It will be because its community chose to evolve, to sacrifice purity for survival, to admit vulnerability and adapt. But if it fails, it will not be because quantum computers were unstoppable. It will be because complacency, denial, and delay left the fortress undefended when the storm arrived. Adapt or collapse, that is the choice. And the clock is ticking. Human beings are storytellers before we are scientists. We seek not only to understand the world, but to believe in it. We tell ourselves that the sun will rise, that gravity will hold us, that promises can be kept. In the digital age, we told ourselves a new story, that mathematics could create incorruptible trust. Bitcoin was more than code. It was mythology. A myth that said, here is money beyond politics, beyond corruption, beyond human frailty. Here is a fortress of numbers, unbreakable and eternal. And for a time, the myth felt real. The blockchain endured hacks, crashes, and bans. Coins were stolen from exchanges, but never from the chain itself. The ledger remained immaculate, the promise held. But quantum computing threatens to end that story. Not by disproving Bitcoin's code, but by exposing the fragility of the belief behind it. The belief that mathematics is eternal.
For mathematics is not eternal, it is bound to physics. The cryptography that secures Bitcoin is not a law of nature. It is an assumption that factoring large numbers is too slow to be practical. Quantum mechanics rewrites that assumption. Suddenly, what was impossible becomes trivial. The fortress of numbers was never eternal. It was only strong until the universe revealed a new trick.
This realization is more than technical. It is existential.
Trust has always been fragile. Empires fall when their currencies collapse. Societies crumble when their promises fail. The gold standard gave way to fiat, and fiat depends on the belief in governments. Bitcoin sought to replace that with belief in mathematics. But even mathematics bends under the weight of physics.
What does it mean for humanity if even numbers can no longer be trusted? On one level, it means adaptation. We will design new cryptography, stronger algorithms, post-quantum defenses. The cycle of locks and keys will continue. But on another level, it forces us to confront the illusion of permanence. There are no unbreakable systems. There are no incorruptible fortresses. There is only an arms race between what we build and what the universe allows. This realization is humbling. For centuries we imagined ourselves as masters of nature, bending reality to our will. But quantum mechanics reminds us that we are still students, still fumbling in the dark, still vulnerable to the mysteries we barely comprehend. Feynman's words echo. I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. And yet it is this incomprehension that now threatens to break our most ambitious attempts at incorruptibility. Perhaps the deeper lesson is that trust must always be placed carefully. Not in permanence, but in resilience. Not in the idea that systems cannot fail, but in the knowledge that when they fail, we can adapt. Bitcoin's myth was incorruptibility. Its reality may be adaptability. If it survives the quantum storm, it will not be because it was unbreakable, but because it was rebuilt. And yet, something will be lost. The myth will be gone. The idea that trust could be banished forever, replaced by pure mathematics, will dissolve. We will return to a world where trust is provisional, contingent, fragile. A world where even numbers can betray us. There is a haunting symmetry here. Satoshi Nakamoto vanished into mystery, leaving behind a system meant to outlast all human fallibility. But what if the system itself was as fragile as its creator? What if incorruptibility was always an illusion? Perhaps this is the real gift of the quantum era. Not destruction, but revelation. The revelation that we cannot escape trust, no matter how clever our codes. That belief is not banished by mathematics, but woven into every system we build. For money is always a story. Seashells, gold coins, paper notes, digital tokens, all are stories we tell each other about value. Bitcoin's story was that it transcended stories, that it was pure fact. Quantum mechanics reveals it is still just another chapter in humanity's long saga of trust and betrayal. This realization is not only about Bitcoin, it is about us. It is about our hunger for certainty in a universe that offers none. We seek incorruptible systems, perfect truths, eternal guarantees. But the universe is slippery, paradoxical, strange. Certainty dissolves under observation. Trust is never absolute. The philosophy of broken trust is, in the end, the philosophy of being human. We are creatures of belief, building fortresses that will one day fall. But in their falling, we learn, we adapt, we build again. If quantum computing breaks Bitcoin, it will not be the end of money or trust or civilization. It will be the end of one myth and the beginning of another. The myth of incorruptibility will die. The myth of resilience will take its place. And yet, in the shadows of that shift, one question lingers. If the universe itself can rewrite our stories, if even numbers can betray us, what, if anything, is truly incorruptible? The answer may not lie in mathematics. It may lie in something older, stranger, more human, the willingness to believe, to rebuild, to adapt, even when certainty collapses. Because in the end, trust is not in numbers, it is in us.
Every story has its ending, and every ending leaves a question behind. The story of Bitcoin began with a promise: incorruptible money. A ledger written in mathematics, immune to fraud, immune to corruption, immune to failure. It was for many the first true digital Eden.
But the story of quantum mechanics is older, stranger, and more merciless. It tells us that certainty dissolves into probability, that locks forged by mathematics are only as strong as the physics beneath them. And when those two stories collide, incorruptible money and incorruptible physics, only one can survive. The day physics breaks money will not look like an apocalypse. There will be no mushroom cloud, no ringing bells, no dramatic collapse in a single moment. It will begin quietly, almost invisibly. A dormant wallet, untouched for 15 years, suddenly stirs. Coins shift. At first, speculation. Perhaps Satoshi has returned. But then more wallets move. Fortunes vanish. Panic spreads. News feeds ignite. Headlines scream. Quantum computer confirmed. Bitcoin fortress breached. Trust collapses. Markets tumble. Exchanges freeze. Governments issue frantic statements. Within hours, the myth of incorruptibility is gone. For Bitcoin, it will be an existential wound. For the broader world, it will be a revelation. The realization that every digital lock, from your bank account to a nation's nuclear arsenal, depends on the same mathematics that just failed. The day physics breaks money will not be only about money. It will be about trust. And trust is the invisible currency that sustains civilization. What happens when that trust evaporates? When we realize that our ledgers can be rewritten, our secrets exposed, our vaults opened? Perhaps the world adapts. New algorithms are deployed, post-quantum cryptography replaces the old, systems evolve. Perhaps Bitcoin itself survives, scarred but not destroyed, reborn as a post-quantum chain. Perhaps investors forgive, believers remain, resilience triumphs. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the breach is too great, the myth too broken, the faith too shattered. Perhaps Bitcoin collapses, taking with it not only fortunes, but the belief in trustless systems. History suggests both outcomes are possible. Civilizations adapt, empires fall, fortresses crumble and are rebuilt, or else left as ruins, monuments to misplaced faith. What is certain is this: the quantum age will arrive. The locks of today will not hold tomorrow. The fortress of numbers will not endure untouched. The day physics breaks money may not come in 5 years or 10, but it will come. And when it does, it will force us to confront the truth we have always avoided. There is no incorruptible system, no eternal trust, no unbreakable code. There is only the dance between what we build and what the universe allows. The irony is perfect. Bitcoin, born in defiance of human trust, may be undone by nature itself. Its fortress was not breached by greed or corruption, but by the fundamental strangeness of reality. Physics, indifferent and relentless, rewrote the rules. But perhaps there is a deeper lesson. If Bitcoin falls, it will not mean the end of trust, but the end of our illusions about it. Trust is not something we can banish with code. It is not something we can replace with algorithms. It is something we must continually rebuild, fragile and provisional, in the face of a universe that offers no permanence. In that sense, the day physics breaks money may not be the end of the story. It may be the beginning of another. A story not of incorruptibility, but of resilience. Not of eternal fortresses, but of endless rebuilding. Not of certainty, but of courage in uncertainty. And so, the camera pulls back. From the glowing laboratories where qubits hum, from the servers where miners chase puzzles, from the wallets where fortunes sleep, from the governments drafting warnings, the corporations raising alarms, the hackers plotting in shadows. It pulls back further still, to the planet itself, glowing blue and fragile against the black. A civilization balanced on trust, staring into a future where even numbers betray. And the voice asks softly, gravely, finally, what do we trust when even mathematics falls? What remains when physics breaks money? The answer is both haunting and hopeful. What remains is us. Our ability to adapt, to rebuild, to believe again. Not because systems are unbreakable, but because we choose to believe despite knowing they will break. That is the true incorruptibility, not of code, not of coins, but of the human spirit itself. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.